travelling to a game here at Anfield, or maybe following the Reds away from home. There's a good chance you'll be connecting to public Wi-Fi somewhere along the way. But did you know that the free Wi-Fi is the hacker's favourite pitch? So instead of chasing the ball, they're ready to steal your sensitive information.
Tom, Alex, thank you so much for that. And moving on a little bit, but that
Sure.
premise, your thesis, if it's accurate, and I'm not saying either way, it's certainly plausible. It seems plausible to me,
Sure.
and we'll see how it plays out. But it could explain the hostility towards Russia.
Oh yeah.
And Putin. Putin's a nationalist. I mean, what he's done for Russia is remarkable. He's
What
done
a lot
what
of Americans, I know. What a lot of Americans don't understand, Rich, and I have to be very careful when I talk to my Newsmax audience about this, because they're kind of traditional conservatives, right?
Yep.
Is that Putin is as much an enemy to these people as Trump is, and that's why he's demonized that way.
Yep.
And once you understand that, like it's easy to talk in positive terms about Trump to these people and say, look, this is where, I agree with a lot of the defense that Trump is putting together for us as a bulwark domestically. I disagree with the foreign policy, root and branch, but he's not even in charge of that right now. Why he focuses on getting through the election. But Putin is is just as bad to these people, because they both stand in the way of the bigger goal. And once you see that, then everything becomes clear. It's no different than when Ron Paul emerged on the scene in 2008. And both the Democrats and the Republicans lost their minds about him. And Hillary Clinton was out there saying Ron Paul is a bad person, right? That's the game. Yeah. There's a plan, and those people they're the club, they run the world, and any challenges to that, doesn't matter what you do. And that plan's been in place, and with Russia, it's been in place for 35 years.
Yes, and then also the Russia banking system is independent of the global or the Western-dominated central banking system as well. Mm-hmm. Russia has loads and loads of gold, and lots of resources. He's done really well for the Russian people, as far as I can tell, right? And then so this brings us to this, I think, farcical episode with Navalny. I hope I got his name right. Completely farcical. I read an article which was in Zero Hedge, but it was from Off Guardian, about the complete flaws and omissions and failures of this premise that this guy was killed by Novichok. This incredibly potent poison just failed to kill this guy.
And everybody around him.
And everybody around him.
And notice that he's in a coma because he can't talk now. I think what happened here, I'll be quite honest with you, is that that Navalny has run his course as an operative. He can't gain any traction in Russia. And now they sacrificed him as a convenient excuse to try and attack Putin before the election. Final chance to put sanctions on Nordstream 2 and all the rest of it, and silence him.
Oh, this is exactly right. Can I just? For me, the point where he suddenly becomes expendable was the constitutional referendum in June, July. There was a widespread expectation. I was, tracking all this very carefully, that he was going to lead big protests, claiming that this was a sham result, and there were expectations that 20,000, 30,000 people were going to turn out, and he was going to be the organizer of all of this. Nothing like that happened, just a few hundred people. And at that point, it became absolutely clear to whoever it is who is behind this particular scandal, that in fact Navalny is really a spent force in Russia, which he absolutely is. And further proof of that, just consider that there's been almost no popular reaction in Russia to the events of the last few weeks. If you take your mind back to Boris Nemtsov, who was the other liberal leader who was killed a couple of years ago, and again, the liberal community then all came out and protested. They're not doing it for Navalny. And that tells you how completely spent as a political force in Russia he is. So I think that made people understand that. His backers understand that. And notice, by the way, a fact which very few people have commented on: he's been kept in a coma. He was bundled out of Russia. He was brought to Germany. Most unlikely he's ever going to go back to Russia again. Of course, he has had no part in that decision. He didn't choose to be taken to Germany. He didn't choose to be removed from the political scene in Russia, or the liberal oppositionist political scene, but he has been removed from the liberal oppositionist political scene. So whoever is the next operation can be put in his place. In the meantime, he will be, pensioned off, presumably, in the Western Circuit, or disappeared.
Like
Well, exactly. Maybe join Yulia and Sergei wherever they are. So either in New Zealand or perhaps feeding the fish somewhere, who knows? But whatever it is, it doesn't look very good.
No, and it became very obvious very quickly. One of the things I was trying to write about this morning, I've got a blog post in the middle of, and by the time this airs, it'll be out, which is to say that there's so many competing elements at this point to how they've manipulated the scenario with Russia and our relationship with them. Between everybody has a different. Russia's everybody's universal bad guy, right? From the Bill Browder angle and the CIA and the MI6 to Merkel and how she wants to use the Russians and how Trump wants to use the Russians and everybody's agendas here are a little different, right? There's no easy through line here. Like I actually, for once, wrote that at a blog post. Like, there's no easy through line here. There's no thesis statement. What there is a whole bunch of competing agendas, all coalescing around who's trying to keep Russiagate alive for as long as possible because they're implicated in it, hoping that it gets past the election. Who's trying to, like Trump, who's trying to reimagine the U.S.'s position with NATO and the UN? Who's trying to do this? Everybody's a little different. Who's just trying to cover their tracks? Yeah. Right. And when you start to think about it from those perspectives, and you start to see how important Nord Stream 2 is from a lot of different purposes, then you just have to like kind of go with, okay, so you can't even make a conclusion. The only conclusion I will reach is that Nord Stream 2 will be completed because Gerhard Schroeder sits on the freaking board of the company, and therefore, which Ira Harris had to remind me of, which will, at the end of the day, ensure that it gets done, regardless of what Trump wants, or regardless of what Pompeo wants, to be honest with you. But then how does that potentially focus? How does that pile into what Turkey's doing in the Eastern Mediterranean, which we all know is about pipelines and gas and all the rest of it. So like it's all just insane. And when you start to, again, lay out the entire spider web, you sound like a madman, right? But the overarching concern here is that this is about these people who currently think they are in charge and run the world existentially feel the threat to their power. Yeah. And when you activate this many different factions, at the end of the day, what you see is them all clashing into each other. And then they wind up falling apart because they can't actually manage any of this. They've lost operational control, just like they lost operational control over BLM.
Yes. I mean, the whole Nord Stream 2 thing. Oh, by the way, I think there is an element of trying to sabotage Nord Stream 2 in this. I mean, I'm sure there is actually. If that happens, German business will be furious. Yes. Because of course, I think you've discussed this many times, Tom. They've seen their cheap energy options being cut off one by one. Exactly. The coal industry's gone. The nuclear power industry is going. Oil is there's problems with oil, right. And so the obvious solution, if they're going to keep these very ambitious carbon targets that they've imposed on themselves, is gas from Russia. Mm-hmm. So the German business community is going to be, I mean, they're not going to be just upset. They're going to be livid if it goes. And that is why Merkel, for the moment, is still trying to hold the line and saying it will continue. So Go ahead. Yeah. And then if it does go through,
what it does, it ties Russia to Germany and to the EU. And Russia being a nationalist state, not part of the globalist, technocratic, corporatist, banker-led oligarchy, is that the challenge that it represents, apart from the fact that the US doesn't get to sell its more expensive gas?
It's absolutely essential to understand about Nord Stream 2 that the proposal to build it came from Germany, not Russia. Right. It's the Germans who wanted it. It was the Germans who suggested it. At the time, back in 2015, the Russians were saying, because they'd had this very upsetting experience with South Stream, which is a pipeline that was going to be built to Bulgaria and which the EU wrecked. Their plan at that time was not to build any further pipelines to Europe at all, but to concentrate on building pipelines to China. Germans came along and said, no, don't do that. We still want your gas. Let's have Nord Stream 2. We've already got Nord Stream 1. Let's have Nord Stream 2. And Merkel backed it, and the Russians went along with it. So it won't tie Russia to Germany. It will tie Germany to Russia. And that's the real problem. Not because the Germans and the Russians are going to form some sort of great alliance to conquer Europe, or because Molotov and Ribbentrop are coming back. None of that. But because if that starts to happen, if Germany and Russia start working together economically, well, of course, they might start working politically. And this atmosphere of tension, which we have seen in Europe, will start to recede. And of course, Ukraine, which we've invested so much in trying to prop up, is going to look increasingly like the appalling investment it already is. So these are the sort of things that are worrying people about Nord Stream 2, and why there's been this enormous agitation to try to get rid of it. Partly, there are economic things, and that of course the US wants to sell its liquefied natural gas. Principally, it's a geopolitical play, because they are worried about what happens in Germany. And I think the other thing to understand is that Germany is an awful lot closer to Russia than Britain is, for example. And of course, in the United States there are many, many Russians in Germany. You go every German city, you hear Russian voices. Not as you do it's different from the way it is in Britain. In East Germany, many people still speak Russian. There's still fairly positive interconnections. There's lots of German businesses invested in Russia. All of that is still there. So this is a partnership that is ready to ripen.
Yes.
And that's the fear.
Now, you're absolutely right, Alexander. And I find it really funny that, they spent so much time gutting South Stream and getting it stopped, and then we wound up with Turk Stream, and which replaces it. And so, and how does that, and it winds up being the same thing. And all that happens from there is that, Serbia winds up being the important transit state, which is anathema to so many people, right?
Yes.
So it's even worse. But, I remember the Russian energy minister saying about a year and a half ago, going, I don't know why everybody's getting so upset about Nord Stream 2. The way the Europeans are going to need gas, they're going to need Nord Stream 3. Like, there's plenty of gas demand going on, which is why I think, from Trump's perspective, what Trump is most angry about is that he doesn't see reciprocity between Europe and the United States, and that his complaint, and I know I wrote an article, I think you disagreed with, about is Trump using this as a means by which to get out of NATO. And what I mean by that is that it's the longer term play, which is that the way they're approaching the Iran weapons ban in the UN. They're trying to create this moment where they can force the UN Security Council to vote against itself and tear that out at the seams. I just believe that Trump doesn't see these institutions working for the United States anymore. And therefore, they can be decremented. And these are the ways that he's attacking them, because if you listen to him rhetorically, that's what he's saying, right? And that he also, I do believe, understands that dynamic that I laid out earlier, which is that they are, from Europe, they are absolutely trying to destroy the US to transfer the power to the European Union. And that's anathema to him. Germany leads the European Union, and if you give them cheap gas from the Russians and the ability to then also set the prices and use it as a political control valve against states like Poland, because now Germany becomes the major transit hub for gas across Northern Europe, right, through the Opal pipeline and all the other pipeline systems, because that's where the majority of the gas is coming through. It's not coming through Ukraine anymore. And the Poles refuse to get over themselves and ask the Russians for a gas pipeline, which they could do tomorrow, right? So that's all of this is, to me, I look at this and I say, this is what Trump's complaint is. This is how he's being used by people like the Never Trumpers and the neocons and whatnot, whose sole overriding concern is to keep Russia down, which feeds into the CIA and the Browder set within MI6 and all those guys. That's been their raison d'etre for the last 50 years, which is how to undermine and keep Russia down, rape it, take it over, and destroy it. So that's that faction. Then you've got Merkel, who's trying to do the ultimate Euro integrationist, who sees this as a political tool she can use against Poland or Hungary and all of this stuff. So you can see how all these factions are playing off of each other this way. And so, to me, none of it makes any sense. The pipeline's going to get built, and because the Germans are, and ultimately, what Trump is saying, I think, to Merkel is, look, if you're going to jump ship, but I'm not paying for it anymore, okay? And I'm not going to, and I don't see the purpose of NATO anymore. I just don't, and I don't think Trump believes in NATO anymore, to be honest with you.
No,
I think he talks a good game about wanting to believe in NATO, but I think he doesn't believe in NATO, which is why he's staying out of the whole Greece and Turkey thing. He's letting Merkel and Macron fight amongst themselves. He's not getting involved in this.
He's not militaristic.
Anybody notice this?
No. Well, Belarus also. I mean, he said absolutely nothing
Zero
about it.
Well, Pompeo runs his mouth daily.
Well,
right?
by the way, what you probably don't know, Tom, is that there was a furious article about Trump and Belarus by none other than John Bolton in the Daily Telegraph. Yeah. So I mean, so there you go. So I mean, there are all those forces. The prospects of freedom in Belarus are slipping away. That was John Bolton, and it's because Donald Trump isn't fighting for freedom in Belarus.
You have to stop laughing at John Bolton. He's got an incredible track record. He just leaves a trail of freedom and liberated peoples wherever he goes.
Absolutely true. Very true.
Everywhere he goes is another trail of tears. It's crazy. I think that's really funny. And the talk about Belarus just for a moment. I think that the way I know I watched the video you did with Alex about this, and I think you're absolutely right that Lukashenko and Putin did a good job of diffusing it. One of the things that was brought up to me by one of my longtime fans said, one of the things about a color revolution that has to happen is you have to have a strong oligarch class, and you have to have some kind of racial division that you can foment. And there isn't that in Belarus. They're all Russians.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
And so that was one of the main reasons why it wouldn't really work. I'm not sure if it was he brought that up, and the Saker brought up some version of that as well. Whereas in the United States, the oligarchs are all in for getting rid of Trump.
Absolutely.
And there is real racial division within the United States, and there is real cultural division. And it's really more a cultural divide between the kind of smug middle-class liberals and, kind of, I hate to say it, but kind of just salt of the earth conservatives who just want to go back to business and go to work. And it's not to reduce the American tableau to that, because it's certainly not that. It's much more difficult than that. But in the modern political parlance, when it comes down to a vote and it comes down to an election, it absolutely comes down to those kind of wedge issues. And those people don't talk to each other anymore. And they don't like each other, and they want nothing to do with each other.
Spoken like a true class warrior that you are, Tom.
Oh, yeah, that's me. Oh, yeah. I'm going to go dust off my copy of Das Kapital right now.
All right. Is there anything else you guys want to talk about or touch upon?
I mean, Alexander, you can go ahead.
I mean, the situation in Britain is quite interesting, I have to say. I mean, we've got almost, I think, a kind of pale version of American politics here, in that I think Johnson is a much weaker leader than Trump is. Very disorganized, very incompetent, also flamboyant. But we have a Labour Party, which I don't know whether Rich agrees with me, but is increasingly looking like a sort of version of the Democratic Party in the US. I mean, it's very, very difficult to see how it differs significantly and from the Democratic Party in its politics, with the same complete absence of ideas. It's not as corrupt, not quite as corrupt, but it is completely empty of thought or policy.
No vision.
It's also, virulent. It's also all about, bashing Johnson all the time, which, he deserves to be bashed.
Blonde man bad.
Blonde man bad. I mean, he deserves to be bashed. I mean, he's not a good manager. I mean, I say that straight away. He doesn't have the force of personality that Donald Trump does. But it's quite extraordinary to see how the Labour Party has just sort of imploded on itself intellectually. It's just now a husk, as far as I can see.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting to see if I haven't been following Brexit for the most part carefully, because obviously the election is really everything here in the United States. But I think the two are inexplicably linked, and it just seems to be playing out the way I expected it to, which is the stronger Trump is towards getting reelected, the stronger Johnson's hand is. Therefore, they can get Brexit over the line. The EU will lose their minds. We'll have a falling out of the euro, and markets will tell you this, by the way.
Yes.
Watch the markets carefully. This is the last thing I'll say, is that watch the markets carefully relative to the dollar, because this whole weak dollar narrative, which by the way is
I disagree with you.
is the whole weak dollar narrative is just nonsense. It's just a reflection of a strong euro, a strong yen, and a strong pound, because the U.S. dollar index is an antiquated and badly designed index, and it's used for propaganda purposes because it doesn't take into account China at all, FYI. Yeah. So the trade weighted dollar index is probably better than this, but watch this stuff very carefully, because when the dollar, and I haven't been watching markets this morning because I can't do anything else other than this chat, but watch markets carefully to sniff out the shift in the political fortunes of the United States. If the United States looks like it's going to solidify around Trump, even if they try to run this crazy scenario with the 20th Amendment challenge and all the rest of it, if Trump wins by a large enough margin on November 3rd, the markets will tell you what's happening. And the Democrats will try and, not concede, and they'll keep markets in a state of limbo all the way through to the end of Brexit. We'll get to Inauguration Day. Trump will be re-inaugurated. Pelosi will wind up in jail, and then everything will solidify, and there's going to be a massive influx of capital into the United States and out of Europe. Right now, all of this election craziness is about, well, I don't know what's going to happen. Is the U.S. going to implode? Because the markets are terrified of Biden becoming president.
Yes.
They're terrified of it. And
why, Tom?
Oh, because they're going to implement every bad economic policy you could possibly imagine, and they will raise the cost of capital in the United States. It will undo everything Trump has done, and they will double down. There will be a wealth tax. There will be a stock transaction tax. There will be this. It will hasten the demise of the United States as planned to push the center of the world towards Frankfurt and Shanghai over the next 10 years. If Biden gets control. If Trump gets control, the same thing is going to happen, but he's going to do it differently. There will be a massive dollar in wave first, a massive influx of capital into the United States. The dollar will rise, implode Europe politically, and then implode the United States politically. And it'll happen. The same things will happen, but they'll happen in a different order. Okay, over the course of the next 5 to 7 years.
Yes.
And so it's kind of hard to explain it all the way through, but that's why this is so very important. That's why Brexit is so very important to the future of the United Kingdom, even if Scotland eventually breaks off or whatever. You have to get away from the European Union, because if Trump wins, and this is why I keep saying this is an existential threat to their 75-year plan to quote unquote fix Europe forever.
Yes.
To make it, okay, they have to win here, and they're going to be willing to do everything imaginable.
Yes.
Including forcing conservatives to secede in the South or taking the left coast away from Trump. Okay? It's on the table.
Very good.
And the only way we get around that is a massive victory by Trump that can't even be overcome through voter fraud and ballot harvesting.
Okay. Alex, any last words?
Well, we live in very interesting times. Well, what else? No year I have ever known in my life has been as extraordinary as 2020. Yes. I mean, it has been the most extraordinary year. I mean, just think about it. We started the year with an impeachment in the United States, which of course is now the unmentionable event. The Democrats don't talk about it anymore. We started with an impeachment. We've had this culminating crisis between the US and China, that this is now escalating to this extraordinary degree. We've had the pandemic, we've had these extraordinary protests and riots and BLM and everything like this. So it's very unstable. But I'm going to say something. I think that the greatest period of instability is behind us. I think we're going to see a period of consolidation, and I do get the sense that the United States, at least the American people, are beginning to consolidate behind Donald Trump. That's my view.
Yeah, I won't disagree with that. That's my hope, and that the way we're reacting to all of this, that the fear porn isn't working anymore. It doesn't give us the same dopamine hit that it did 6 months ago, and now it's all right. We're in it now. I don't have a job. I'm not sure if I'm gonna I mean, people are okay. Here's one for you. The entire U.S. educational system is going to change. Okay, it's already changing. People are pulling their kids out of schools, out of public schools, so fast because they don't want to send them back. Kids don't want to go back with masks on. They don't want to do the stupid social distancing garbage. They don't want to. I had to move my daughter refused and to go back to her old school, and we had to switch schools for her. I'm not alone here. Okay, you've got the teachers unions are desperately trying to block parents watching kids stand over their kids' shoulders and watch the lectures. Like everything is changing, and that, you know, creating social unrest and creating economic unrest sounds good in theory, but these are people that are only good at seeing first order effects, and they cannot see secondary, tertiary, and quaternary effects. They don't see everything. And it's very clear in all of their policies. These central planners are very arrogant in the way they operate, from the central banks down to the governors. And because of that, that's, I think, what Alexander's getting at when he says that the American people are beginning to see the problem, that we are now experiencing that secondary and tertiary consequences of people who don't have a future being asked to sacrifice everything for nothing. And they're not going to do it.
For Orange Man bad. That's it.
Because Orange Man bad. Like,
that's it. Give up everything. You know what? My last comment as a former social worker, this whole thing about defund the police, complete nonsense. It's not going to win. It's, you know, it's losing support, because I'm like, well, if I was, you know, I've, as a social worker, had to go into homes to remove children, all for my own safety because of who's in that house. I brought the police in with me. I've called the police and said, listen, come in. Who's going to do that? Who's going to go in and remove men who've been battering women? Who's going to do that? Well, it's insane.
Well, defunding or abolishing the police protect. All right, police can be brutal. They can do bad things, but they are ultimately the line of defense of the most vulnerable.
That's right. Make them democratically accountable to the community.
Yeah. We have a conversation to have about police brutality in the United States, and there's no argument. And I'm the first one to have this conversation. I'll be the first one to. But it's downstream of policies, technocratic policies that have been put in place over the last 50 years to marginalize and destroy the middle class, and then put the police in ever escalating violent situations where they have to then become more militarized.
Absolutely.
So you want to de-escalate the police, you take away their limited immunity, and you end the drug war at the same time, and everything will change.
Yes.
And what people are doing when they're buying weapons here in the United States in a way, I can tell, dude, I can't get ammunition. 9mm every day Plinkin target ammo, not self-defense ammo, target ammo is 65 cents a round. This stuff 6 months ago was 20 cents a round.
Wow.
Okay. You get it, and it's off the charts how things are happening. What people are learning right now is that their government is not there for them. The object lesson now is the government's not going to be there for you. Your insurance company's probably not going to be there for you. This one's not going to be there for you. That one's not going to be there for you. You're responsible for yourself. You want to raise the last thing these people want to do, the Davos crowd want to do, is create another generation of ultra self-reliant Americans. It's the last thing they want to do, and they're doing it right now. They're raising another generation of me. They're insane.
My God, no.
No, silence that guy. I can't believe I haven't been deplatformed yet. Crazy. Remember, guys, I live in a house I built myself.
Yes.
Right? I have bug out bags prepped for, when Antifa comes to dox me. I'm ready for this. Let's do it.
Okay.
Whatever.
Top. Alex. Thank you so much. Thank you. 100 million thank yous. I've so enjoyed this. We will do this again.
Of course we will.
And what I want to say is I'll have the links to your channels in the description below. Go check both of them out. And
I need to, and Alex, I will send you emails for us to sit down and have a chat for my podcast, because I've been meaning to do it for weeks now, and I keep just forgetting it. So let's try and get together.
Let's definitely do that. My great pleasure.
Very good. Very good. And follow them both. And if you're watching this on YouTube, go to BitTube, find the bit that you've missed out. And between now and ordinarily I cover cryptocurrencies. And by the way, it's really, really great in the cryptocurrency space. Let me just say that it's really, really exciting and positive.
Yes, it is.
Beginning of a bull run. And between now and when I see you next, please keep filling your pockets with crypto profits. This is Crypto Rich and Crypto Tom and Crypto Alex signing out. All the best. Bye-bye.